"Who the hell is she?" one of the men screamed, clutching his arm as the black maid stood over his friend's crumpled body, eyes blazing, chest heaving, the restaurant frozen in stunned silence. Moments ago, she was just refilling wine glasses. Now, she had just taken down 2 grown men like shadows on a wall, and there were 3 more coming. No one knew her name. No one saw it coming. Not even Andrew Baker, the billionaire. The lighting in Barclay Prime was dim, golden, the kind of light that made diamonds glimmer harder and egos stretch taller. The chandeliers above looked like constellations frozen in time. Laughter echoed softly over polished marble floors, silver clinking on porcelain plates, and the muted hum of Philadelphia's elite, enjoying their Friday night escape from consequence. Andrew Baker sat at the corner booth, alone. His tailored charcoal suit was worth more than the server's annual rent. His Rolex flashed only when the cuff moved just enough to show it. He didn't speak unless spoken to. He didn't smile unless the deal closed. And tonight, he was just trying to forget. Across the table, untouched steak, 2 empty wine glasses, 1 chair still pulled out, from a date that never showed. Again. His assistant had said, "Sir, maybe it's time to stop looking for something real in places built on performance." But Andrew wasn't looking for real. He was just tired of being nothing but numbers. That's when she passed him, Sophie Morrison. She didn't look at him, not the way others did. No widened eyes, no sudden politeness, no fake smile. Just steady hands and a quick pace. Her navy uniform fit snug against her athletic frame, hair tied into a clean bun, a small notebook tucked into her apron. She moved with focus, with rhythm, like someone who had trained for something other than serving the rich. But she was invisible, and she preferred it that way. Sophie had been working at Barclay Prime for 11 months and 3 weeks. Not that anyone had asked. Most of the time she worked in silence, heard things she wasn't supposed to hear, watched things no one thought she noticed. She didn't react. Not when men bragged about offshore accounts, not when women whispered betrayals over $200 steak, not even when someone tried to touch her waist like she wasn't human. She just tucked it down, like she always had. That night was no different, until they walked in, 5 of them, loud, suits that didn't quite match the class of the place, eyes that scanned like predators. She could tell instantly they weren't here to dine. They moved like a pack, surrounding Andrew's booth. Her hand tightened around the wine bottle she was carrying. Vintage 2006. Aged well. Shame if it shattered. She hovered nearby, pretending to check a tablecloth crease. She heard it. "You think you can hide behind money forever, Mr. Baker?" Then lower, darker, "Your past just caught up." Andrew didn't flinch. He looked up slowly, calmly. "I don't owe you anything." One of the men leaned in, blocking the candlelight on the table. "Oh, you will." Sophie's body tensed. She'd seen men like this before, not here, somewhere else. Somewhere dustier, louder, where respect had to be earned with fists, not titles. Her fingers relaxed, her breathing slowed. She wasn't just a maid, not really. But no one here knew that yet. If you were in her shoes, would you have stepped in or stayed invisible like they expected? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Be honest. The first glass shattered before anyone screamed. Andrew's wine splashed across the white linen tablecloth like blood in slow motion. The man closest to him had slapped the table hard enough to knock everything sideways. That was the signal. Suddenly, Barclay Prime wasn't a restaurant. It was a battlefield. 2 of the men lunged toward Andrew, knocking the candle off the table as they did. Another stood at the edge of the booth, blocking any chance of exit. Guests gasped. A woman near the front door dropped her fork and clutched her pearls. A security guard by the bar didn't even have time to react. Andrew stood up, calm, as always, but even his voice couldn't cut through the chaos. "Gentlemen, I don't think you understand where you are," one of the men growled. "We know exactly where we are, and we know exactly who you are." They grabbed him, and that's when Sophie moved. No one saw her coming. She didn't shout. She didn't warn. She just let the wine bottle fall purposefully. and caught the man behind Andrew in a chokehold so fluid, so precise, he didn't even have time to scream before he hit the ground. Another man turned, surprised. Big mistake. Sophie spun, low, and struck behind his knee with her foot. He dropped. 1 second later, she swept his leg and elbowed him in the chest. Clean hit. He landed hard, unconscious, 2 down. That's when it happened. "Who the hell is she?" one of the men screamed, clutching his arm as the black maid stood over his friend's crumpled body, eyes blazing, chest heaving, the restaurant frozen in stunned silence. Moments ago, she was just refilling wine glasses. Now, she had just taken down 2 grown men like shadows on a wall, and there were 3 more coming. No one knew her name. No one saw it coming. Not even Andrew Baker, the billionaire. One of the attackers tried to swing a champagne bottle. Sophie caught his wrist mid-air, twisted it just enough, crack, and flipped him into a linen-covered table. Silverware and bone china exploded across the floor. Sophie turned to Andrew, breathing hard. "You okay?" Andrew stared at her like she was speaking another language. "You... what the hell?" "No time," she said, scanning the room. "There's still 2 left." One of them bolted for the kitchen. The other pulled something from his coat. Not a gun, but close. Sophie didn't hesitate. She reached behind the bar, grabbed a pepper grinder the size of a baseball bat, and charged. The entire restaurant watched in frozen disbelief as the smallest person in the room dismantled an ambush meant for a billionaire. Across the dining hall, a man whispered to his wife, "Is she even a waitress?" "No," the woman whispered, wide-eyed. "She's something else entirely." Andrew's knees buckled. For the first time in years he felt powerless. Not because of the attack, but because someone he never even noticed, had just saved his life. And he didn't even know her name. "You're still watching this, right? You didn't blink during that fight, you didn't breathe, and you're still here. But you haven't hit the subscribe button yet? Come on. Stories like this deserve a home on your feed. Smash that button. Don't ghost us like Andrew's date did." The restaurant was chaos in reverse, the kind where silence didn't mean peace, just shock. Security had finally shown up, far too late. The attackers had been restrained, some groaning, others completely unconscious. Police sirens could be heard in the distance, cutting through the Philadelphia night like sharp edges. Andrew Baker stood by the bar, sleeves rolled up, tie loose, still in disbelief. He wasn't used to not being in control. And the woman who had just saved him, she was gone. "Sophie Morrison," the manager muttered, scanning a list on his tablet. "Been with us almost a year. Barely speaks unless she has to. Never late, never causes trouble." Andrew didn't respond. His eyes swept the restaurant floor, smashed glass, toppled chairs, broken wine bottles, and then paused on a single napkin lying flat and untouched. He picked it up. His hands were still trembling. Outside, Sophie walked down the alley behind Barclay Prime, her apron off, her eyes sharp. She moved quickly, deliberately, like someone escaping something. Not just a scene, but a life. She'd almost made it to the end of the alley when she heard it. "Hey!" She didn't stop. "Sophie, wait." His voice was deeper than she remembered from inside, calmer, but desperate. She sighed and turned slowly. Andrew jogged to catch up, slowing as he reached her. The streetlights above flickered across his face, not polished now, just tired. Human. "I didn't get a chance to say thank you." "You don't need to," Sophie replied. "Well, I want to." "Why?" That single word stopped him. He blinked, confused. Because you saved my life." "You think I did that for you?" Silence. Sophie looked past him, down the empty street. "You think I risked exposure, arrest, my job, just because you're some rich guy in a booth?" Andrew stiffened. "That's not what I meant." "But it's what you thought." She started to walk away again. He followed. "Then tell me, why did you do it?" She didn't stop this time. Because I've seen men like them before, she said over her shoulder, and I know what they're capable of. It had nothing to do with you. But that wasn't entirely true. And both of them felt it. Inside, the restaurant had started to return to normal as it could be after a blackout of violence and mystery. Guests whispered, phones buzzed with recorded videos, and Andrew Baker stood in the alley, watching a woman he didn't understand walk away from him without fear. He didn't know her, but something in him needed to. Back in her tiny apartment across town, Sophie peeled off her uniform and sat silently on the edge of her bed. A small photo sat on the nightstand, an older man, military uniform, smiling, her father. "Never let them see you first," he used to say. "Surprise is the only weapon they can't prepare for." She stared at the photo, her jaw tightened. "I broke the rule, Dad." Andrew sat in the back of his town car, hands steepled under his chin. His assistant spoke softly through the Bluetooth. "We'll spin this to make it look like a random mugging." "It wasn't random," Andrew said. "They knew me." "Still, the press will eat it up, especially the part about the maid. She's gone viral already. Dozens of phone videos." Andrew's eyes narrowed. "Find her, quietly. I want to talk to her." But Sophie wasn't answering calls. She wasn't responding to messages. She was trying to disappear again, into the background, into the safety of invisibility. What she didn't know, this time someone was looking for her, not to exploit her, but to understand her. 3 days later, Sophie was back to washing dishes in the back of a hole-in-the-wall Caribbean spot on the south side of Philly, a place with flickering lights, greasy tile floors, and a boss who paid her in cash to avoid paperwork. Exactly how she liked it. No press, no viral videos, no billionaire bosses trying to ask too many questions. She'd changed her number, deleted her social media, and tossed her Barclay Prime apron in a trash bin outside the train station. She was invisible again, until she wasn't. The door swung open. A man in a dark suit stepped into the steamy back kitchen, catching everyone's attention. "Excuse me," he said, scanning the room. "I'm looking for Sophie Morrison." She froze mid-scrub. Her co-worker Dave glanced at her. "Sophie?" She shook her head. "Tell him he's got the wrong girl." But it was too late. The man spotted her, walked over, and handed her a card. "Mr. Baker would like to see you. You saved his life. At least hear what he has to say." She didn't answer. She didn't even take the card. She just turned off the faucet, untied her apron, and walked out the back door. Later that night, she found herself outside a hotel she couldn't afford to look at too long, let alone walk into, the Rittenhouse, 5-star, all glass and gold. She didn't know why she came. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was that she was tired of running. Maybe it was the part of her that remembered what it felt like to be seen, even if it was for 5 chaotic minutes. Either way, she walked in. And there he was, Andrew Baker, standing by the elevator, looking like he hadn't slept in days. He looked at her like she was the answer to a question he hadn't dared ask. "I didn't think you'd come," he said quietly. "Neither did I," Sophie replied. In the penthouse suite, she sat stiff on a leather sofa. Andrew poured 2 glasses of water, not wine this time, no assumptions. "I didn't bring you here to ask about what you did," he said, setting the glass in front of her. "I know what I saw. I just want to know, who are you really?" She stared at the glass but didn't drink. "I'm nobody," she said. "No," he said, voice firm. "You're not. You're not just a maid. You're not just some employee. You moved like you were trained. You fought like someone who's been through war." She looked up. "And if I was, I'd still be alive because of you." That silenced her. For the next few minutes, neither of them spoke. The city skyline blinked in through the glass, the sound of traffic below a distant hum. Finally, she broke it. "I used to be someone else," she said. "Before Barclay, before everything. My dad taught self-defense in West Philly. He was ex-military, taught me everything he knew. Thought I'd join the force, maybe even go higher." "What happened?" Andrew asked gently. Sophie's eyes drifted. "Life happened. He got sick, bills stacked, training stopped, jobs came and went. And I stopped being someone with a future. I became someone who just survives. He studied her, really studied her. And even after everything, yet you still stepped in for me. She looked at him then. Because I don't like bullies. Doesn't matter who they're after. He leaned forward. Then let me do something for you. Let me help. You think you owe me, she said, standing up. You think this is your rich man guilt talking? No, he replied calmly. I think I've spent too long surrounded by people who wouldn't lift a finger for me, unless there was money involved, and someone finally did something real that matters. She stood there for a long second, uncertain, defensive, but listening. And for once, she didn't walk away. Sophie didn't remember falling asleep on Andrew's penthouse couch, but the sound of rain tapping softly against the glass windows woke her in the early morning. She sat up quickly, alert, like old instincts kicking in. A thick blanket was draped over her. The untouched glass of water still sat on the table. Andrew wasn't in the room. She stood, paced, unsure if she should leave or wait. Her bag sat by the door. No one had touched it. Then she noticed the file. It was sitting on the marble counter. A manila folder, thick, worn, her name written on the tab. Sophie Morrison. She opened it carefully. Inside, her resume from years ago, old military academy acceptance letters, training certifications, even newspaper clippings about a self-defense workshop she ran with her father in West Philly before everything collapsed. And at the very back, a photo of her and her dad, smiling, arms crossed, two warriors who never expected to lose. Didn't mean to pry, Andrew said from behind her, walking into the kitchen in sweats, holding 2 coffees. She turned slowly. You went digging. I asked someone to help me understand who you are. You saved my life. I owed it to you not to forget that the second the headlines died down. Sophie stared at him, face unreadable. You think you know me because of a folder? No. I think I know what you've survived. He handed her the coffee. She didn't take it at first. Then, slowly, she did. He sat on the edge of the counter like a man who had finally decided not to wear his money like armor. I didn't grow up rich, he said suddenly. Most people assume I did. I clawed my way up in tech, started with nothing. Slept in a storage unit once. You'd be surprised how cold concrete gets in Philly in the winter. She raised an eyebrow. What happened? I made a deal, got lucky, then smart, then distant. Turns out success can be the fastest way to lose who you were. Sophie sipped the coffee. It was quiet for a beat. Then she said, You still have time to remember. Andrew smiled faintly. That's the first hopeful thing you've said. Flashback. Sophie's memory. It was 2 years ago. The clinic waiting room smelled like bleach and grief. Sophie sat beside her father, whose hands shook from the chemo. She held his wrist gently, trying to stop the tremors. His skin was pale, too pale. You don't have to stay strong for me, he whispered. Yes, I do, she said. He looked at her then, eyes tired but proud. Whatever happens, you keep your edge. Don't let this world soften you into someone you're not. She didn't cry until weeks later, not even at the funeral. But every night after, she practiced the same moves he'd taught her, alone, on the roof of her building, under moonlight. Back in the present, Sophie sat back on the couch, file in her lap. You don't get it, she said. I don't want handouts. I don't need some savior. I've been surviving without anyone's help for a long time. Andrew nodded. I'm not offering a handout. I'm offering a choice. She looked at him. I own a private security firm, he said. Small, elite, quiet, mostly protection and recovery work. I think you'd be better than half the people I already have. Silence. You want me to work for you? She asked. No, he said. I want you to work with me. There's a difference. Sophie didn't answer, but her fingers stopped fidgeting, and for the first time since the restaurant, her jaw unclenched. Maybe. Just maybe. She didn't have to run anymore. Later that evening, the rain stopped, and the sky over Philadelphia turned a soft steel blue. clouds clearing just enough for the city lights to breathe again. Andrew sat on the rooftop terrace of his building, wrapped in a blanket he hadn't used since winter. He stared at the skyline with a rare kind of stillness, the kind that only comes when you finally realize you've been running without moving. He didn't hear the door open behind him, but he knew it was Sophie. "Nice view," she said quietly. He looked over. "It's better when you don't feel alone in it." She sat beside him, holding 2 mugs, one for her, one for him. Mint tea, simple, warm. "I used to come up on my building's roof back when I was a kid," she said, sipping. "It was the only place people didn't expect something from me. I could just exist." "You think I expect something from you?" She smiled faintly. "You're a billionaire. You don't make offers like that for nothing." Andrew leaned back against the railing. "I didn't make an offer because I want something. I did it because I'm tired of watching good people get ignored while phonies run everything." She raised an eyebrow. "You're part of that world." "I know," he admitted, "and I hate it more than you think." There was a long pause. A gentle breeze rolled across the rooftop. Sophie pulled her knees to her chest. "You know the worst part about hiding who you are." Andrew looked at her. "You start to forget too." He didn't say anything, just listened. "I used to be loud, confident. I taught self-defense at a shelter, ran drills with teenage girls who thought nobody cared about them. I used to feel like I mattered." "You still do," Andrew said softly. She gave him a look. "You don't even know me." "I didn't know your name 3 days ago," he said, "and you're still the most honest person I've met all year." She chuckled, not because it was funny, but because it almost hurt. "No one ever called me honest before. Bossy, sure. Aggressive all the time, but honest." He shrugged. "First time for everything." They shared a rare, genuine laugh. It lingered in the night air, floating between 2 people who, under different circumstances, would have never even noticed each other. A pause. Then, "What happened to your mum?" Andrew asked. Sophie looked surprised. "You did that much digging and didn't find her?" "I stopped when it felt like I was crossing a line." She stared at her tea for a second. "She left when I was 9. Said she needed something more than Philly could give her. My dad didn't beg. He just picked me up, told me we'd be okay. And we were. Until we weren't." Andrew nodded slowly. "You ever want to find her?" "No," Sophie said. "She didn't just walk out on him. She walked out on me." That kind of silence stays with you. His eyes softened. "Yeah, it does." They sat there for a while, 2 cups of tea steaming in the dark. 2 people who had both been abandoned in different ways. Andrew stood and held out a hand. "Come back tomorrow, we'll talk more about the firm, no pressure, just options." Sophie looked at his hand, then up at him. "I'm not promising anything. I'm not asking you to." She took his hand. It was the first time either of them had really touched the world without armor on. The next morning, Sophie returned to the penthouse, not because she had made up her mind, but because something about leaving it all unexplored felt unfinished. Andrew greeted her in the kitchen, halfway through an espresso mid-call with someone about private onboarding protocols. He ended the call the second he saw her. "You came back," he said, hiding his surprise behind a sip. "Don't get ahead of yourself," she replied. "I'm just here to hear the pitch." He smirked. "Fair." They sat down at the breakfast island. He slid over a thick, leather-bound folder, his security firm's dossier. Clean, professional, high level. Sophie flipped through it slowly. Real contracts, real missions, real stakes. But something felt off. Too soon, too polished, too targeted. She narrowed her eyes at the last page, her name, her background, a full analysis. "Wait," she said, voice tightening. "This is me. This is my profile." Andrew nodded slowly. "Yes, it's part of how we vet people before we onboard." She looked up, her eyes no longer curious, now guarded. "You had this printed before you asked me." "Sophie, I told you." "No, you didn't ask me. You decided. You've already made plans for me, like I'm a check you wrote." Andrew stood, defensive. That's not what I... Did you already assign me a role? A title? A salary? He hesitated, and that was enough. Sophie's voice dropped. You think just because you're not like the others, just because you offer a seat instead of a leash, that you're not still trying to own the situation. That's not fair, he said. What's not fair, she shot back, is spending years being overlooked, underestimated, invisible, and then finally being seen, only to realize it's because someone was looking for a tool. Andrew looked gutted. I don't see you as a tool, Sophie. I see you as someone with a gift who's been buried by circumstance. She shook her head. You see me as a project, something to fix, to feel better about. You needed saving, and now you're trying to flip the power dynamic before I even had the chance to breathe. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was filled with shame. Andrew lowered his voice. You think I'm trying to control you, but I'm just trying to give you what you deserve. I don't need you to decide what I deserve. She grabbed her bag and turned to leave. He didn't follow her. He didn't stop her, because he knew. She was right. That night, Sophie returned to her apartment, sat in the dark, and listened to the ceiling fan squeak. The folder sat unopened on her table. She looked at it like it was a bomb. Everything inside it was shiny, stable, powerful. Everything she'd worked for in silence. But it was missing one thing, her consent. Across the city, Andrew sat in his office, replaying the conversation in his head. Every word she'd said like a slow echo in an empty room. He had only meant to offer a chance, but somehow, somewhere along the way, he'd let control seep back in. He wasn't trying to own her, but he'd forgotten how it felt to not be the one pulling the strings. And now, the only person who'd ever looked him in the eye without flinching was gone. You're still here. Still watching. Still feeling this? Then you're already in deeper than you think. Don't just feel it. Subscribe. Because stories like this don't find everyone. But they found you. Sophie sat in the laundromat on 23rd and Reed, surrounded by the hum of dryers and the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. Her clothes spun behind the glass drum, but her mind was far from laundry. The manila folder sat on her lap. She hadn't opened it again. What haunted her wasn't what Andrew offered. It was how quickly she'd felt owned by it. She hated how easily her survival instincts kicked in. How the moment things got real, she pushed him away. She hated that she didn't know how to accept help without questioning the motive behind it. But most of all, she hated how she missed his presence. How even in that fight, in that moment of betrayal, she wanted him to understand her, not fix her, just see her. Andrew didn't go to work the next day. He cancelled 3 meetings, skipped a conference call, ignored 12 messages from his board. He sat in the Rittenhouse lounge, a quiet jazz record spinning in the corner, and tried to write an apology. He rewrote it 5 times, deleted it 6. Finally, he picked up his phone and recorded a voice memo instead, but he didn't send it. Instead, he hit share location and sent her a single line of text. If you want to talk, I'll be here until midnight. No pressure, just peace. Then he placed the phone face down and waited. Sophie saw the message at 10:07 p.m. She stared at it for 3 minutes straight. No strings, no promises, just a choice. She hated how it softened her anger. She hated even more how it opened a door she thought she had sealed shut. She grabbed her coat. At 10:41 p.m., the glass door of the Rittenhouse lounge opened. Andrew didn't look up immediately. He thought he imagined the sound. Then he heard the footsteps. He turned. Sophie stood in front of him, still guarded, still strong. But this time, her armor had cracks in it, and her eyes weren't on the floor. They were locked onto his. I didn't come for a second offer, she said firmly. You're not getting one. That caught her off guard. I came because... She hesitated. Because I wanted to decide for myself. Not out of guilt, not out of debt, just choice. Andrew nodded slowly. Then I'm glad you came. They sat across from each other in a booth near the back. No music, no food, just quiet space and unspoken apologies. I'm sorry, Andrew said finally. I didn't realize I was doing the thing I hate, taking control without asking. I'm sorry too, Sophie replied. I'm used to pushing people out before they can decide I'm not enough. They sat with that truth for a while, not as wounds, but as facts. Sophie reached into her coat pocket and placed the folder on the table between them. I read it, she said. Andrew waited. I've got questions and conditions and I'm not promising anything yet. He smiled faintly. That's more than fair. But if I did say yes, she paused, it wouldn't be because I need saving. No, Andrew said. It would be because you're the kind of person who does the saving. She looked at him for a long time. No smirk, no sarcasm, just stillness. You don't give up easy, do you? He shrugged. Only on things that don't matter. They sat side by side this time, closer, not touching, but no longer afraid of what that closeness might lead to. Not romance, not rescue. Something better. Respect. Mutual choice. 2 weeks later. Barclay Prime had repaired everything. The broken tables, the shattered wine glasses, the emotional tension that once hung in the air like smoke. Everything was back to how it was. Except for 2 things. Sophie walked through the restaurant in a tailored black blazer, no apron, no wine bottle in hand. Her steps were firm, her posture sharper than ever. Not a server now, but a security consultant doing a quiet audit. Nobody knew, of course. They just saw a new manager doing her rounds. Only Andrew watched her with the knowing eyes of someone who had seen the whole truth. She paused by the corner booth, the same one where, weeks ago, he sat alone, the same one where 5 men tried to make him disappear, the same one where she became someone no one could ignore. Andrew slid into the booth across from her with a slight smile. Looks like you own the place. She raised a brow. Please, you still pay the bills. But you command the room, he said. That's worth more. There was a short silence between them, the comfortable kind. Then Sophie leaned in. You know, I keep thinking about that night. The second I stepped in, it was instinct. I didn't even think. And yet, Andrew said, it changed everything. She nodded. I used to think I'd spend my life unseen, hidden behind uniforms, jobs, just getting by. You were never invisible, he said. They just didn't know where to look. Across the restaurant, a customer suddenly raised his voice. Excuse me, this wine is not what I ordered. The waiter began to stammer. Sophie stood, already walking toward the commotion, not with anger, but authority. Sir, she said, calm but clear. Let me help correct that. Andrew watched as the man backed down almost instantly. Sophie handled it in under 30 seconds. Efficient, graceful, unshaken. She returned to the booth and sat back down. Handled, she said. He chuckled. You didn't even threaten him. She smiled. Didn't have to. Later that night they stood outside the restaurant as the city lights flickered across wet pavement. It had rained again. Not heavy, just enough to rinse the air. Andrew glanced at her. Do you ever regret stepping in? She looked at him. No, she said. That night, for the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. And now, I feel like I'm finally becoming more than I ever thought I could be. He didn't respond right away. But then he said, You know, I've spent years surrounded by people who look at me like a number, a checkbook, a means to an end. Sophie raised a brow. And me. You looked at me like a man about to get his ass kicked, he said with a laugh. She grinned. Well, you were. They stood in silence for a beat. Then Andrew spoke again, quieter this time. I don't know what this is between us. Friendship, partnership, something else. But whatever it is, I don't want it to end here. Sophie didn't smile. Not yet. But her eyes softened. Then let's see where it goes. On my terms. Deal? He extended a hand. She took it, no hesitation. That moment, 2 hands, meeting in the same space where one once held power and the other stayed silent, meant more than either could say. It wasn't about saving or owing. It was about choosing. Together. You've made it this far. Watched Sophie fight. watched Andrew fall and rise again. You felt that moment, didn't you? Then don't just leave quietly. Subscribe. Because stories like this, stories that start with chaos and end with choice, they're rare. And you're already part of it. Do you believe true connection can come from the most unexpected places? Tell us in the comments. We read every single one.